Roof structure. Accurately calculating the costs for the roof structure can be a tricky, time-consuming business. But the NHE Plus makes it really easy. The 5-bedroom house that we're pricing does have a very complex roof structure, which is great, as we'll be able to see all the straightforward options that are available to us and how simple pricing even the most complex of roofs is with this programme. OK, this is the roof we need to price. We have quite a combination of things going on that we need to allow for. The way to approach this is to break it down into sections. Like in this picture, we'll just price it a section at a time and all of the details and costs will be drawn together for us. This method can be applied to whatever type of roof needs to be priced. The only type of roof we would not allow for, here in the roof structure section of the pricing sheet, is a flat roof. Flat roofs have their own section on the pricing sheet and are calculated in there. Main roof structure. OK, this is where we enter the details for the main roof structure. In our job, this is going to be this section. It's a hip roof. We can adjust the name of this from the default main roof section if we want. Just type in this yellow box to change it. To begin, we need to tell the programme the type of structure that this roof will be. Let's click on this thumbnail picture. This opens the roof structure wizard. In here, we use the straightforward forms to set the roof to our required preferences. First, specify if it's a lean-to roof or an apex. This is an apex. Next, if it's rafters or trusses. Ours is rafters. Now click OK. This interactive diagram provides us with a visual reference for all the different roof styles. We just click on the one that represents the roof or roof section that we want to price. The main roof section is a hip, so we click the hip picture. In the final form, we need to check and, if necessary, adjust the material requirements for our roof. As we can see, each element of the roof is shown independently. So we have collars. If collars aren't needed, just untick the box and they'll be removed. The drop-down menu is where we can view and adjust the material for our collars. When we click it, the collars in the picture highlight blue, giving us a further visual reference. If additional collars need to be allowed, enter the quantity in this box. Below this are the rafter details. Exactly the same applies. We can view and adjust the material. Again, the rafters in the picture highlight blue. Any additional rafters are entered in here. Next we have the ceiling joists. If they aren't needed, untick the box, check and, if necessary, adjust the material. Here's the ridge. Again, if the default material needs changing, use the drop-down menu. Below these items, we have the materials for the hips. If they need to be changed, use the drop-down menus. This section of the form contains the details for the valleys. The roof type that we have chosen doesn't have valleys, so as we can see, it just says valleys not required. We can view the information that is brought through to this section when a valley roof is selected in the additional roof section part of this movie. When all of these details are set correctly, we click Enter Details. The programme will then get to work and enter all of this information into the main roof section on our pricing sheet. OK, so the structural information is entered. Now we just need to check the pitch. It is a yellow box, so we can change this if we want. The pitch of our hip roof section is 45 degrees. We can enter the span into this red box, or we can click on the thumbnail picture. This clarifies what measurement the programme is asking for with a visual reference. We'll enter 5.4 linear metres. We can also enter the soffit width. This is 0.3. We'll notice that there are a further 2 red boxes that are pre-filled with default measurements. The soffit is set to overlap onto the wall. The default overlap is set at 0.075 linear metres. This is a red box, and we can change this measurement if we want. The default measurement for the thickness of the wall is 0.3. This is correct for our job, but again, we can change this if we want. When we're done, click Enter Details. The height is automatically worked out for us. The programme uses the pitch and span that we have entered to calculate this. We entered the soffit width into the picture, and this has been put into the correct box by the programme. Finally, we put in the length of the roof. We can enter it directly into this red box, or use the thumbnail picture. Let's click it. We'll enter in 8.8 linear metres. This thumbnail also provides us with further information about how the programme uses the length of roof measurement we've entered. We can also adjust the centres by using this yellow drop-down box. Our centres are 0.6 linear metres. If any more information about where to take the length measurement from is needed, click this blue info icon and the further details can be viewed. We have already specified that this roof is made up of rafters. The final option, select what the valley is joining to, isn't required. Our main roof section doesn't have a valley, but we will be looking at this option in the additional roof sections movie. As we've selected collars, we do need to enter the length of a single collar into this blue box. This is 2.2 linear metres. OK, so all the information for our main roof section has been entered. We've looked at this in great detail, but essentially, when entering the main roof section, we just specified the type of structure, then entered 3 numbers into these red boxes. From that minimal amount of information, every item and task for this main roof has been calculated. We will be looking at what's been allowed in the roof sections totals part of this movie. First, we'll be looking at the additional roof section options. Additional roof sections. The NHE Plus gives us the ability to price up to 10 roof sections on every single job that we do. It is unlikely that every job we price will have 10 different roof sections, but nevertheless, the option is there if it's required. The roofware pricing is complex. It's made up of 4 very different styles of roof. So far, we've priced up the main roof, this being the hip part, but we still have 3 other sections to price. We'll start with this section here, the lean-to section with a gable both ends. To open the additional roof section, click here. OK, this should look familiar. Each additional section is laid out in exactly the same way as the main roof section we've just looked at. As we did with the main roof, for any additional roof sections, we just need to specify the type of structure and enter 3 numbers into these red boxes. OK, by default, this is called Section 2. We could leave this like this, but we'll overtype it and call it Roof Over Lounge. We'll click the thumbnail picture. This is a lean-to roof, so let's click that. It is rafters, so we'll click that, and now we move to Stage 2. We have a gable both ends, so just locate the relevant picture and click it. We don't need collars or ceiling joists on this section of roof, so we will untick both of these boxes. These will be switched off and not calculated. We'll check the material that has been selected for the ridge and the rafters. We don't have any hips or valleys on this roof. The programme knows this, and the text tells us that these are not required. We enter the details. The information is automatically entered into our pricing sheet. Now, we just check the pitch, enter the span, this is 4.7. The height's automatically worked out for us. The soffit width is 0.3 linear metres. The length 5.4 linear metres. The centres are 0.6. Everything for this section of roof has been worked out. We're going to look at the cutting list in detail in the next movie section, so we'll just skim past that and get our next roof section entered. We'll just go back to the pricing sheet to view the picture. Getting back to the pricing sheet is really straightforward. Just click the clearly marked button. So we're going to price this part now. It's an apex section with a hip and valley. OK, we'll go back to the additional roof section. We click here. We're going to name this section Roof Over Front. Click the thumbnail. It's an apex, and it's rafters again. Now we move to Stage 2. This roof is a hip and valley. There's the picture. We click that. We'll notice that because this roof has hips and valleys, these sections of the form contain details. That we'll check in just a moment. We don't need collars, so we'll untick that. The materials for the ridge, rafters and ceiling joists are correct, so we don't need to change them. The materials for our hips are here. So we have the actual hips. See the blue highlight when we click on the drop-down, and the hip infill. These also turn blue when we click on the drop-down. We can view and adjust the details and material selections for our valleys in this part of the form. So the valley infill type is set as rafters. We could change this in here if we wanted, and adjust the original selection we made. The materials for the infill. This is correct, so we'll leave that. If we click on the lay board, again, a clear visual reference and we can change the material. And finally, we have the valley boards. We want this material, so we will leave this as it is. All of the details have been checked, so let's enter them in. Now we enter the span. This is 2.8 linear metres. The height's worked out. Now the soffit width. This is 0.3. And the length. This is 1.2. We'll leave the centres as 0.6. And the valley infill is rafters. In the main roof section movie, I mentioned that we would look at the select what the valley is joining to option. This roof section does have a valley, so it is switched on. Let's take a look. We'll click on the red question mark. OK, this opens a form. We're provided with an explanation and a checkbox. Essentially, we need to tell the programme what it should or shouldn't be calculating when it works out the covering for our overall roof structure further down the pricing sheet. As we can see in the diagram, this hip and valley roof section that we've just entered is overlapping onto the main hip roof section that we entered earlier. And that main hip roof section is a new roof. By checking this box here, we're telling the programme not to calculate covering for the blue area on our main roof section that this valley roof is joining onto, as it won't be required. The blue text here tells us the number of metres square that will be deducted from our roof coverings to allow for this. If this value is overlapping onto an existing roof, the area of the overlap would not need to be deducted from the roof covering section of the pricing sheet, as we would just be stripping the covering from the existing roof. So we would need to ensure that the existing roof option was selected and the checkbox in the picture was unticked. We do need to enter the pitch of the adjoining roof. This is a yellow box, so we can change this if we want. OK, so our hip valley roof is entered. Again, we'll just skim over the cutting list as we'll look at this in detail in the next movie section. Let's go back to the pricing sheet. We have a final section of roof to enter. It's this one here. It's an apex section of roof again, and it's a hip, a butt. We'll click to get back to the additional roof section. Scroll down. This is our fourth and final section of roof. We'll call it Roof over Games Room. Click the thumbnail, select apex, rafters again, and we move to stage 2. Now we click the hip, a butt picture. Again, we just check the material details. We don't need ceiling joists on this section, so we'll untick that. The information about the hips is here. This section doesn't have a valley, so this box is empty. Enter the details. Now we check the pitch. This is 45 degrees. Enter the span, 5.3 linear metres. The height's worked out for us. The soffit width is 0.3 and the length is 3.7. The centres are 0.6. We'll enter the length of a single collar. This is 1.8 linear metres. OK, all our additional roof sections are entered. Let's go back to the pricing sheet. Getting back is easy. Every additional roof section has this big Go Back to Pricing Sheet button at the top. Just click it. We've looked at this in detail, but as we've seen, no matter how complex the roof, getting it calculated is really easy. Just break it down into sections, tell the programme what type of structure it is, and enter the span, soffit width and length. Everything for every roof structure section we have entered has been worked out, and we'll be looking at what's being calculated in the next movie sections. Cutting list. When we enter the details for any roof section, the programme will automatically work out a cutting list for that section of roof. The blue text, that is our cutting list, tells us the quantity of timbers we will need for that element of the roof, as well as the length each of those timbers needs to be. The great thing about this is the programme is working out the lengths that we will need based on the timber lengths that can actually be purchased. The default setting in the programme is based on timber being available in increments of 0.3. We can view more information on this by clicking on this blue info icon. We can see that the wastage allowance is 6%, but in the cutting list section of the roof structure, the programme knows to override this. So it doesn't add on wastage, it just looks at the length we have entered and rounds it up to the nearest standard length that can be supplied. As mentioned, this is based on the multiples of 0.3. This is so helpful when it comes to ordering. We'll start by looking at the cutting list for our main roof. Here are all the dimensions for our main roof section, that we entered earlier. It's an apex hip roof. It will be constructed from rafters and it has collars and ceiling joists. Okay, so this is the cutting list for it. The first item is the rafters. We can click the blue question mark for a visual reference. We can see the number we will need and the length that is required. If at this stage we realise that extra rafters are required, we can enter the quantity here, in this box. We don't need extra rafters, but look, if we put one in, we can see that our cutting lists adjust to allow for this. Next we have the ceiling joists. This is a red question mark. Let's click it. OK, in this picture, we can adjust the distance that the ceiling joists overlap onto the wall on each end. By default, 0.3 linear metres is allowed, but this can be changed. Here, we can see the quantity of ceiling joists that we'll need. Again, we can enter in additional ones if required. Collars are next. We did tick this box in the Roof Wizard, but if we change our mind, we can untick here. We do want these, so we'll put it back. The quantity of collars is here, and if extra ones are needed, just enter them in. Hips and hip infills are worked out. We don't need lay or valley boards or valley infills for this roof section, so nothing is calculated here. Finally, we have the ridge. We can see the actual length of it here. The programme has rounded this up to the nearest available length that can be purchased. Let's go to the additional roof sections we've entered. We did have different types of roof that have different requirements, so we'll take a quick look at the cutting lists for these additional sections. The cutting list for our gable roof that is going over the lounge is here. We can see the quantity of rafters that will be required. The total length of the ridge is shown here in the yellow box. It's very long. We can see that in the cutting list, the programme has calculated that we will need to order 2 lengths at 3.6 linear metres. Let's click the question mark and see how the programmes work this out. This is a great feature. OK, in here we can tell the programme the maximum length of timber that we could order from our supplier. It's set as 5.4 linear metres. We can adjust this though if we wish. We can also specify the length of the overlap on each ridge for a scarf joint. The programme then uses both of these details to ensure that the lengths in the cutting list will do the job. If we adjust the maximum length that can be purchased to 6.3 linear metres, see, the programme will then update the information in the cutting list to allow for this. So now we would need one length of 6.3 for our ridge. The actual length of ridge has not changed, but the programme is using the new information about the available timbers to generate the most practical and relevant cutting list for us. The cutting list for the roof over front is here. This is our hip and valley roof. All of the timbers that we will need are shown in this cutting list. The lay boards and valley boards are here. If we click on the question marks for these, we can see the programme is working out the cutting list for these based on the fact that we've told it the maximum length of lay and valley board that we could purchase is 5.4 linear metres. Just to show you, let's adjust the pitch of the existing roof that this roof will be going onto. We'll notice that as we increase this, the lengths in our cutting list automatically adjust to allow for this. Let's just change that back to 45 degrees. The cutting list for the games room roof is here. Again, we have complete information about the lengths and quantities of timber we'll need to purchase for this section of roof. So the rafters, collars, hips, jack rafters and the ridge. Like in all the roof sections, we can click on the question marks for a visual reference and use the blue boxes to enter in any additional timbers that we may require. OK, as we've seen in the additional roof section of the pricing sheet, we can enter the details for our additional roof sections and view the cutting lists. We'll now go back to the pricing sheet where we can look at, and if required, adjust the materials and see the costs, hours and totals for each roof section. Roof section totals. The NHE Plus works out the costs and hours for each item that will be required for each roof structure section that is entered. As we've seen, we have the ability to estimate the costs for many different types of roof. To ensure that we can really drill into the details and allow for any unique requirements that a particular section or roof type may have, rather than trying to show it as a job lot, the NHE Plus organises the timbers, any SIPS panels and insulation for each roof section into their own independent subsection here on the pricing sheet. This means that if multiple sections of roof have been entered, like on the job we're pricing, Fine-tuning the details and keeping track of what's what is really straightforward. Let's start by looking at the totals for our main roof section. The title for this subsection is shown here, and here are all the items within it. We also have this useful blue text that reminds us of the roof structure type. Our cutting list that we looked at earlier told us the lengths of timber and number of these lengths that we would need. But here we can see the total number of linear metres we'll require, as well as the associated hours and labour costs. We can also use the drop-down menu to select a different type of timber if required. OK, so we can see the totals for our rafters, ceiling joists, collars, hips and jack rafters. If we click on the blue question marks, we're provided with a visual reference. If we click on the red question mark for the ceiling joist, we can adjust the length of overlap on the wall. Below the timbers, we have the option to allow for SIPS panels. If these are required, just switch them on. The programme will look at the dimensions of the SIP panel and SIPS ridge that is selected, and use this to calculate the quantity that will be required. We would then just enter the number of hours to calculate the labour costs. We will notice that there is not a price in the green box, just the text that says quote. Due to SIPS panels being a more specialised product, costs for these can vary greatly and will be dependent on the quantity being ordered and so on. A price for these would need to be obtained. This could be entered directly into this box here on the pricing sheet or added to the quote library. We don't require these, so we will switch these off. Next we have the insulation. We've got lots of options here. We do have ceiling joists on our main roof section, and the insulation will be going in the ceiling rather than the rafters. We can have 1 or 2 layers of insulation, and we can specify where each layer will go by using the drop-down menu, or we can click on the question mark like this. OK, this form is interactive. We have a visual reference that shows us the different options. So insulation in the ceiling, insulation in the rafters, or a layer of insulation in both the ceiling and the rafters. If we click the layer of insulation for ceiling option, we're provided with a drop-down menu where we can select the material for the first layer that will go between the joists. We're also given the option to add a second layer. If we tick this, we are provided with a further drop-down menu where we can select the material for this second layer that will go over the top of the joists. The same process applies if we tick the insulation for rafters options. We'll look at this in more detail when we get to the roof over lounge totals. Let's just tick the third option. We're provided with 2 drop-down menus, where we choose the insulation for the ceiling and the insulation for the rafters. It's so straightforward. OK, as mentioned, we are doing ceiling insulation on this section of roof. So let's select that, check the materials, and enter the details. The NHE Plus will look at the dimensions of the insulation that we have chosen, then calculate the quantity that we will require for this section of roof. We'll notice that due to the second layer being a thicker type of insulation, we'll require more rolls. Next we have the totals for the roof over lounge section. The programme has automatically given it the name that we entered in the additional roof section of the pricing sheet. We also have the blue text reminding us that this is a gable lean-to roof. Like the main roof, all of the costs and hours for the timbers are here. We can change the type of material in the drop-down if we want. There are options for SIPS panels. We just switch them on if they are required and complete the blue boxes, remembering that we'll need to get a quote for the panels and ridge. The insulation for this roof section is here. We don't have ceiling joists on this section and we'll set it on the rafter line. OK, so we tell the programme that the first layer is for rafters by ticking this box. We're provided with a drop-down menu. We'll choose this 100mm one. This will go between the actual rafters. We're given the option for a second layer. We want this, so we tick it. We will choose a different, thinner type of board to go over the top of the rafters. We'll choose this 40mm one. Enter the details. The insulation for our roof over lounge is worked out. Next, we have our roof over front. Here are the details. Again, we can see the title and the blue text telling us it's a hip and valley apex roof. All of the information for the timbers is here, along with the option to allow for SIPS panels. We will be doing 2 layers of insulation in the ceiling of this roof, so we will just check the details. We can do this by clicking the red question mark or by using the drop-down menus like this. The totals for our final roof section are here. This is the roof over games room. We can change the type of timber that's going to be used here in the drop-down. SIP panel options are here. We will be doing 2 layers of insulation in the rafters. Let's click the question mark. So we just tick the first layer box, check the material that is to go between the rafters, check the second layer box, and just check the material that will go over the rafters by using the drop-down menu. We enter in the details, and it's done. OK, so as we have seen, the totals for each roof section that is entered are dealt with independently, meaning we can fine-tune the details of the timbers, any SIP panels, and insulation really easily, and ensure that each individual section of roof is set to our exact preferences. Other items. The Other Items subsection in the roof structure part of our pricing sheet is located here. In this section, the NHE Plus calculates the costs and hours for any other items or tasks that our roof may require. It's important to note that this section is calculating for the roof as a whole, rather than individual sections of roof. Let's start at the top and work our way down. The wall plate that will be required for the entire roof is worked out here. We can adjust the material by using the drop-down menu. Next, we have the gable ladders. Let's click the question mark. OK, the programme begins by looking at which sections of roof, if any, actually have gables. If, like in our quote, there are gables, it may be that we do want gable ladders with barge boards, like in this picture. Or we may just have the gable with no ladder coming through. Just tile battens over on the wall, undercloak with a cement verge, like this picture. Opting to not have gable ladders is very straightforward. And the text here tells us we just click on the relevant picture in this form. Let's switch off the gable ladder. So we click this picture. We check the details, these being the thickness of the wall and the overhang of the roof covering. The programme then calculates the overhang of the walls for us. When these are correct, click Enter Details. We're taken back to the main gable ladders form. Click Enter Details again. The gable ladders are switched off and removed from our costs. We want gable ladders on our job, so let's switch them back on. We click the question mark, click the gable ladders option. Again, using the pictorial reference, we ensure the default information is correct. So the gap between the rafter and the wall, the thickness of the wall, the width of eaves and the thickness of the timber for the gable ladders. The programme will then use this information to work out the length of the gable ladder noggin. We enter the details again, and the gable ladders are included and calculated for us. We can adjust the material here in the drop-down, and we can see the quantity of it that will be required. Binders are automatically worked out for us. Let's click the question mark. We can adjust the way that this is calculating. Currently 5 rows are being allowed for each relevant section of roof. We can see the overlap percentage. We can adjust both of these options if we want. Bracing can be entered here. We will notice that it is a blue box, so it will require the estimator's judgment. If bracing is needed, check the material in the drop-down menu, then enter the number of linear metres that will be required. We'll enter 222 linear metres for our job. We can allow for any steel bracing here. Again, it's a blue box, so we just check the material and we'll enter 40 linear metres. Trimmers are next. We don't require any, but if there are any roof lights or dormers, the trimmers are entered here. Purlins and any supporting beams in the roof can be accounted for here. We don't have any on our job, but we would just enter the material in the drop-down and enter the number of linear metres into the blue boxes. We do have the option to account for sheathing. In some parts of the UK, sheathing is used on most jobs. If this is the case, we can adjust the default in our master file so it's always switched on. If it is switched on like this, it will automatically calculate sheathing for the whole roof. We can see the quantity here. Let's click the question mark. We do have a roof section that is joining on to another new roof section, like in the picture. If we tick this box, then the programme will deduct the area of the valley on the adjoining roof from the roof's sheathing. When we click Enter Details, we can see that the quantity of sheathing required has decreased. We don't require this, so we will switch this off. Velux windows and flashing can be added in here. Just select the type of window and flashing in the drop-down and enter the quantity that will be required. It's important to note that the Velux windows and flashing work independently, so we do need to check that the flashing we select does match the window and vice versa. Wall plate restraint straps are worked out for us. These are calculated based on 2 metre centres. We can change this if we want. Next, we have truss clips. Let's click the question mark. Here the blue text tells us how the programme calculates these. We do have a roof constructed from rafters, but we will still be using these, so we'll leave this switched on. If truss hangers are required, then our judgment is needed, as they have a blue box. We just check the material and enter the quantity in the blue box. Gable restraint straps are worked out. Let's click the question mark. This is calculated based on there being 5 per gable. This is in a yellow box, so we can adjust this if we want. The default material for our fascia and soffit is plastic. If timber is generally used, this may be something that we want to adjust in our master file, so it's set that way every time we price. Or we can adjust it on a quote-by-quote basis like this. So we click it, and we just click on the option we want to use. The choices being timber, plastic, and not required. The option that is selected will be indicated by a tick. Let's run through these. We'll tick not required. As we can see, the costs are removed. It states here in the green box that it's not required, and the thumbnail picture also says not required. Let's change this to timber. Click the thumbnail, tick timber. We specify the materials for the fascia and soffit. Once chosen, enter the details. Everything's worked out based on our choices. We can see the number of sheets of ply. Let's click on the red question mark. In here, we can view and adjust the length and width of the plyboard that's being used for the soffit. If we click this thumbnail picture, we can view a complete cutting list for our plyboard soffit. It's really detailed and broken down, showing each section of roof that we've entered. So we can see the width of the soffit and the length of the soffit that will be required on each section of roof. We've got the actual number of sheets for each roof section, followed by the number that has been allowed for each roof section. We can click this blue info icon and view further details of how it's worked out. We're actually using plastic fascia and soffit, so we'll click the thumbnail again, click plastic, select our materials, and enter the details. Everything instantly switches, and we can see the costs and quantities for our selection. We can allow for soffit vents. Let's click the question mark. We can click on the interactive picture to specify the type of soffit vents we want. When we click, we're provided with the drop-down menu and switch the option on by clicking the box. Everything will instantly calculate. We don't require these, so we will just switch them off. Barge boards and eaves to barge boards are here. If we want both, or just barge boards, we tick the boxes like this to switch them on. Like the fascia and soffit, we can specify the material type by clicking on this thumbnail. The options we have are plastic, timber, or not required. By default they are set as plastic, but let's just look at the other options. We'll click timber. We specify the material for each of these, then just enter the details. All the costs are worked out. Let's click the eaves to barge board question mark. If we are using timber, we need to make sure that the width and length of the plyboard that we're using is entered correctly. The programme will use this information to work out how many eaves can be made out of a single sheet of ply, then calculate the number of sheets that will be needed. We'll just change this back to plastic. Sprocket board is automatically worked out. Like the eaves to barge boards, if ply is being used, we need to check that the dimensions of it here in the picture are correct. If sprocket board isn't needed, then we can switch it off like this. We do require it, so we'll just switch it back on. Fixings. All of the fixings for our roof structure have been worked out. The subsection that contains them all is here. The blue text tells us the total for all the fixings that will be required on the roof structure we've entered. By default, this section isn't opened up. This is to help keep the pricing sheet as streamlined as possible. There are multiple items in the fixings section, and it's likely that the details of these will be fine-tuned in the master file, rather than each time a quote is produced. If we do want to view and check what's been calculated, it's really easy. Just tick this box. The Fixings section opens. Let's take a look at what has been worked out. The fixings for the rafters, trusses, are here. We can see the quantity required and the type of fixing that's going to be used. We can adjust this if we want. If we click the red question mark, we can see how these are being worked out. Okay, so we have rafters, and we know that 4 fixings are being allowed per rafters. The blue text clarifies that when these fixings are being calculated, infill for valleys and hips are included, but binders and any bracing are not. If trusses were being used, then 6 fixings per truss would be allowed. Both of these can be adjusted. Let's change the fixings for rafters to 6. We'll be putting 3 in the bottom and 3 in the top. Ceiling joist fixings and bolts are here. Let's click the question mark. We can adjust the quantity of fixings and bolts that are being allowed. We just type the quantity required into the yellow box. We can also change the type of fixing or bolt in here too. If either or both of these aren't needed, we can switch them off. If we switch off the bolts, then the washers and the timber connectors will be removed too. We're going to nail our ceiling joists up and bolt them, so we will leave these options switched on. We're provided with exactly the same options for our collars. If we click the question mark, we can view the quantity of fixings and bolts per collar and change them if we want. Again, we can switch off either or both. If we switch off the bolts for the collars, then the associated washers and timber connectors will automatically switch off too. We also want both of these, so we'll turn them back on. The fixings for our binders and any bracing are calculated together. We can see that the programme will allow for 2 fixings every time a binder or brace crosses over a truss or rafter. We can change this quantity if we want. We can see exactly how the fixings for our fascia and barge board are being calculated. The text here explains how the fascia fixings are calculated based on the centres of the rafters and trusses in each roof section. 2 fixings will be placed every 900mm on the barge board. All of these details can be changed. We can drill into this level of detail on all of the listed fixings. Just click on the question marks and full information about how they're being calculated can be viewed. If the question mark is red, then it will be an interactive diagram that will allow us to fine-tune the details. We can also use the drop-down menus here on the pricing sheet to adjust any of the selected materials if required. As mentioned at the start of this movie section, this level of fine-tuning is best done in our master file. Additional timbers. The additional timbers subsection is located at the bottom of the roof structure section. If there are any other timbers required for the roof that have not been allowed already elsewhere in the roof structure section of the pricing sheet, then we can add them in here. To enter additional timbers, just start at the left and work across. If we click in the yellow box, we're provided with the drop-down list. Select the most appropriate description. Next, check that the type of timber is correct. We can use the drop-down menu to select something different if required. Now, enter the total number of linear metres that will be required, and all the costs and hours will be worked out. We don't need any additional timbers for the roof structure we're pricing, so we'll just remove this. Extra row and totals. The roof structure section does contain all of the common and not so common items and tasks that may be required. But if we need something that isn't listed, we do have the option to add in an extra row or rows. Just click the extra row button. We don't need an extra row, but adding one in is really straightforward. For more information on this, just click the blue info icon. The totals for the roof structure section are here. We can see the breakdowns for the materials, hours, and labour, and the overall total is here. These totals are all cost. Markups and VAT are added when we get to the summary report. We can view a snapshot of the roof structure section by clicking the View Summary button. We'll be taken to the summary sheet, and here we can see the hours and totals. To return to the pricing sheet, click this button, and we're taken back to the top of the roof structure section.